Fire those off. I'm just going to go over, and if you can wave as I recognize each one of you that are participating today, if you have your video on. My name is Delegate Hala Ayala. I represent Virginia's 51st District, and I'm proud to welcome former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, who'll join us shortly, Attorney General Mark Herring. Awesome. Representative Jerry Conley from the 11th Congressional District. Senator Jennifer McClellan from the 9th Senate District. Majority Leader Charnel Harry. Delegate LaCherice Aird. Delegate Don Scott. Delegate Sam Rasool. Delegate Jay Jones. Delegate Jeff Bourne. Delegate Luke Torian, Chair of Appropriations. Delegate Dolores McQuinn. Delegate Mark Sickles. Delegate Elizabeth Guzman. Delegate Suhas Subramanian. Delegate Betsy Carr. Delegate Danica Rome. Delegate Joe Lindsay. Delegate Mark Levine. Delegate Ken Plum, Chair of Agriculture and Chesapeake Natural Resources. Delegate Plum, wave to everyone. Delegate Cliff Hayes, Chair of Science and Tech, which is now known as CTI. Welcome everyone, we're so excited to have you. We have a special guest with us, Reverend Vernon Gordon, who will be moderating today's event. Let me just give you a little bit about the good Reverend. Reverend Gordon focuses on people and community at large. He and his wife, Ashley, established Life Church in July 2015. They have been actively involved in community discussions and charity work in the Richmond area. Reverend Vernon and Ashley were married in 2011 and have two children, Madison and Jackson. Welcome, Reverend Gordon.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it is such an honor to be with so many storied leaders across our great Commonwealth. I consider it a great honor and privilege to be able to moderate this conversation today. I would like to believe that with so many wonderful leaders who have had so many accomplishments in our past, but also busy doing the work of the present, that my experience with moderating church meetings is going to give me a little bit of grace to help keep all of us on track. And so I'm excited about the task at hand. What we're going to do, and just for those who might be watching, whether on live or rebroadcast, I just want to articulate our format for our conversation today. We have several amazing community leaders and organizers who are going to be sharing with us about how police brutality, how the present climate and contour of this conversation of our country is landing on their specific organizations and communities. Each of them will be given about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to be able to share their heart, and we're truly excited to hear that. And then following each of their sharing, we will create some space to transition to a question and answer where all of our elected officials and servant leaders will have the opportunity to ask questions of our community leaders and organizers with the opportunity for them to respond. We also will create space as you are preparing to ask questions, or if you are an elected official and desire just to share thoughts to the conversation as well, we will make space for that following the sharing of our community leaders and organizers. What I'm going to ask of everyone is that we try, in the interest of time, to honor the time that has been allotted. Again, not trying to go over the 2-minute allotment, but to be able to, with great clarity and trying to be concise, articulate our positions and our heartfelt desires for how we progress this conversation forward of racial justice in our state. And so I'm really excited to move this dialogue forward. And once again, it's already been communicated by Delegate Ayala, you are on mute. So I know one of the Zoom things that often happens is people start talking without unmuting themselves. So please make sure you keep consciousness of that and unmute yourself. And then, as I mentioned, following their sharing, we will create a transition where we can ask questions and take forward this beautiful dialogue. As we start today, I wanted to share this quick quote that I believe is so vital for the framing of our hearts and minds. It's by George Bernard Shaw, one of my favorite authors. He says, the greatest challenge in communication is the illusion that it is taking place. And I truly believe that as we dive into our dialogue today, we are doing the hard work and the hard work that is necessary for us to not only just share, but to have a conversation that truly drives us forward in the work of racial justice in our society. So with that being said, I'm going to begin to move through our community leaders. And I want to start today with Ms. Felicia Sharp. The clock is yours. It is your time to share.
Reverend Gordon, this is Delegate Ayala. As we get our community leaders, because I didn't introduce their organization,
Okay.
I just hope that they just introduce themselves and what organization they represent before answering the question. And I apologize for that, but for the sake of time, please proceed, sir.
No, absolutely. That's awesome. Again, as Delegate Ayala has already stated, please make sure you articulate the organizations you represent as well. I will allow you to do that, so we'll give you a grace period of 30 seconds on that. That's how. Again, is Felicia Sharp on the line today? If not, we will move forward. Okay, can we move forward then? And if she does come on or has any challenges, she can let me know. But can we move forward with Brandon Hutchins? Is Brandon Hutchins on our line today? Okay, I don't see Brandon either. All right, so I'll move along. Let me see. Do I see Miss Tanya James? Are you on today? All right, I think they're going to be joining us shortly. I'm getting some notifications here. So Monica Hutchinson, would you please lead us forward in our dialogue today?
Yes, so good afternoon, everybody. I am Monica Hutchinson. I am with the Henrico County Branch NAACP. My son is actually with me as well, Jay Sean, also with Henrico NAACP, Youth and College.
And Youth. All right, yeah.
Youth and College chapter. So one, I want to say thank you for having this conversation. This is a very important conversation to have. And as a mother, a community organizer, this is something that I'm deeply concerned about. I'm the mother of 3 teenage kids. My youngest is on the spectrum. And after what we all have seen happen with Elijah McClain, police brutality and systemic racism is something that I have always been deeply concerned about. It's always been one of my worst fears. And to see it happen to another mother just shows just how much work we have to do, both with police brutality and also within our school system. So thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And I know that Jay is prepared to share as well. So we also invite Jay Hutchinson to share at this time as a leader of his community. So share.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Sean, and I am a leader for not only the Black community, but the gay Black community. I am part of the Henrico County NAACP Youth and College chapter. Yeah.
Well, I'll put a little bit there, Jay. Anything that you would like to contribute to this conversation about why it's important to you and ultimately what you pray that this conversation progresses for our communities?
Well, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm just trying to put it into words. I just want my voice to be heard, and singing. I just want to be visualized and understood from this conversation. So anything I share here today, I just want everyone here to take it with you and actually think upon it,
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation today. We're truly excited to hear your voice and your heart. We now want to transition to hear Ms. Monica Sarmiento. Please come join us in the conversation at this time.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Delegate Ayala, for having this incredible event. And I'm so happy to see so many elected officials here in this absolutely pivotal time during our history, not only in the Commonwealth, but in our nation. So my name is Monica Sarmiento, and I'm the Executive Director for the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights, a collaborative of 37 organizations throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia that fight for the immigrant rights movement. And to be perfectly honest, we've been fighting a lot of systemic issues that have really impacted so many immigrant communities of color for such a long time, not just those who are documented, but also those who are undocumented. And to be here and to really have that forefront conversation of the inequities and also the difficulties that so many of our brothers and sisters face in a system that has really oppressed them and really cut them off from really seeking the American dream. So it is incredibly valuable to have this conversation with all of you, and I am incredibly grateful to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we will now have Ms. Dora Muhammad share. You're on the call.
Yes,
Hi.
I'm here. Good afternoon. Thank you, Delegate Ayala, for the invitation. At the Virginia Interfaith Center, I serve as the Congregation Engagement Director. Our full name is the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. Many of you all are very familiar with us up at the General Assembly. So we've historically used a racial justice lens to shape our policy work. Last summer, however, we moved to explicitly place racial justice in our mission statement in response to seeing the comfortable public conversations around blackface, but then a hushed public silence about the Klan robes. And then in the fall, we established a racial equity team that focused first internally on the organization. And then recently we established a racial equity committee within our board as we began to prepare to engage in our external work. So all of this laid a year's foundation for our public response to the recent protests. We issued a statement against racism to affirm that we uphold the value and dignity of Black men, women, and children as the cornerstone of achieving racial equity. While we aim, as always, to galvanize people of faith and goodwill throughout the Commonwealth as a moral voice in support of various just and humane policy reforms that will emerge around policing, we also feel compelled to lift up bold, transformative frameworks of seeking justice at this time. Just changing policies in response to the current movement of protest has resulted in a continual shape-shifting of white supremacy in each generation. To truly achieve racial justice, we believe the Commonwealth must confront the historic violence of white supremacy that bleeds into present-day criminalization and dehumanization of all people of color. We envision this work to include, one, fostering space for faith communities to acknowledge and examine and redress the role that their faith tradition has played in sustaining white supremacy, centering the work of the new commission to study slavery and subsequent discrimination as foundational to achieving racial justice, and not just relegating it to the sidelines as a discretionary project at the General Assembly, including indigenous tribes in policy priorities because the legacy of the genocide of Native Americans is too often obscured, establishing and prioritizing restorative justice programs and models throughout the Commonwealth, and then broadening that application of restorative justice principles to a wider public, collective, internal work of truth and reconciliation that might not necessarily take the form of traditional commissions or tribunals. The violence of white supremacy is deeply embedded in Virginia's institutions, policies, and practices. So uprooting it will require nullifying the emotional investments made to sustain it that has been dependent on inflicting trauma upon all people of color. We can only heal wounds after they have been openly cleaned. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you so much, Ms. Muhammad, for your sharing. We truly appreciate it. We now will move to hear the voice of Mr. Marquise Hunt at this time.
First, would like to say thank you to the delegate for this invitation. I currently serve as the Chairman Emeritus of the National NAACP Youth and College Position Task Force, where I, along with other leaders across the country, help create the policies and programs for our young people, over 25,000, one of which is represented here on this call, to kind of put forth some efforts of the responsibility of young people in our community. Of course, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen young people take to the streets, and in any movement that we've seen across this country, young people have been at the forefront. But one of the things that I want to echo off of not only Ms. Hutchinson and Ms. Muhammad is that at this point, I think young people are really at a moment in our history where we're trying to move swiftly from dialogue to action and from action to implementation. And so we are, of course, working with our elected officials and other leaders in our communities to help frame policy work that can break down, and not only break down, but seriously dismantle the system of systematic racism and oppression in our communities. And so it's a pleasure to be here alongside you guys.
Thank you so much for sharing. We now move to the voice of Ms. Tanya James, who I believe is on the call today.
Thank you. And thank you, Delegate Ayala, for creating this space for us to have this most important conversation. For those of you who do not know me, in this capacity, I am one of the human rights commissioners for Prince William County, as well as I am the state director or the state field director for the Virginia Democrats for the 2020 cycle for the re-election of Senator Mark Warner. I think it's important that we continue to be present in this moment. I kind of feel like some people are starting to move on, but it's important more now than ever that we continue to press through so that we can get that meaningful legislation that I know our friends in Richmond and our friends in Congress really want to see happen. But if we are not present and we don't continue to have conversations about the things that need to happen, I fear that it will not. I fear that something else major will happen and we'll move on. And we honestly can't afford that. This moment deserves every ounce of our attention. And again, I thank you for creating this space, Delegate Ayala.
Thank you so much for sharing. We will continue to hear the voices of our community leaders and organizers by now transitioning to the Reverend Dr. James Allen, who I know we don't visually see, but I believe he is connected to us by audio. Reverend Dr. Allen, the floor is yours. A few more moments to see if audio can be connected. There it goes.
There you go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. James Allen. I am the president of Virginia Beach Interdenominational Ministers Conference. And I, too, am very glad that we're having this conversation. My comments is really very, very brief. We need to make sure that our elected officials understand that it's time to do something. It's time to do something. We've all been at this place before where there's been a hue and a cry. And a lot of time the elected officials will ride the hue and a cry out and nothing is accomplished, nothing is done. So that's my voice. Let's do something. Let's do the things that's necessary to be done.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Allen. We now transition to offer the floor to Mrs. Gayleen Canelton. I believe I said the last name right, so please correct me if I did not, but Ms. Gayleen Canelton, please share at this time. You're still on mute. Just what I see you talking, but I know I can't hear your audio. There you
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, good. You were close. My name is Gayleen Canoyton. I wear a lot of hats, but this hat that I'm wearing today is I am the Virginia State Conference NAACP Political Action Chair. I'm the Vice President of Region 1, which consists of Hampton Roads, New Kent, Charles City, the Eastern Shore. And I'm also President of my Hampton branch NAACP. And I'm echo what everyone else has said since I've been on. This is a time, I grew up in the 60s, so this is a replay for me. And so, and what Dr. Allen said is right, we want to do something, but we also need to figure out how we can collectively work together in each other's space, in our spaces, because everyone plays a role, and together we can get things done. And this is our time to get whatever we need to get done in civil rights, in terms of police reform, criminal justice reform, the whole 9 yards. This is our time to do it now and work collectively. And at the same time, working collectively, making sure we're maximizing our space in what we're doing right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for correcting me. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay.
We now move on to hear the voice of Ms. Beatrice Amberman. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Delegate Hala Ayala. My name is Beatrice Amberman, and I am here representing as a chair of the Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations. And I just wanted to share with everybody that, of course, we all know that racism has been codified and put into laws in our institutions, and those laws have inflicted suffering and injustice in our communities for generations. It is also, and it has also unleashed hate, division, and dehumanization of many communities here in the United States. And just to give you an example, the Latino community has experienced hate, and the FBI has revealed that in 2018, at least 485 hate crimes have been perpetrated against Hispanics. Just recently also, we have seen what the federal conversations have done to our community, separating families, putting our children in cages, and including just recently, yesterday, we have heard news about this. So we have experienced racism and bias, and we are determined to unite and work side by side with our friends in the Black, Native American, Asian, Muslim, Jewish communities, with anybody, people of, with justice in mind, to make sure that we change the laws that have done this damage to communities for generations. We called also for change. And one of the things that I want to share with the community is that voting and civic engagement does make a difference. And I am proud to have seen that made a great example of our Commonwealth of Virginia in this past year. My community have fought for decades for different issues, but we saw that this year at the General Assembly, thanks to the fact that we changed the makeup of the representation of our community, we were able to make sure that those laws that for centuries we worked and have placed suffering in our community changed. So my message to everybody is that yes, voting and making sure that we have the representation of people that are listening to our voices is important, but our organizing, our participating and supporting one another, and the conversation with our elected leaders like today is extremely important. So I'm very pleased that all of those people that can help to hear our voices and then bring those proposals to make changes, real changes in our communities are here today. So the time for silence is over. We must boldly and with courage make the changes that our country is demanding. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for sharing. We're so grateful for your contributions and work. And now we transition to Ms. Claire Gastonia to share at this time.
Thank you, Reverend. I really appreciate you and your leadership today, and I appreciate the delegate for bringing us all together and all of the elected officials who've chosen to make time on a Saturday afternoon to hear from all of us. I'm Claire Guthrie Gastonyaga. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU of Virginia, which represents more than 85,000 people across the Commonwealth and works in coalition with a number of different organizations who are present here and in a number of different efforts that we're trying to make change by centering the voices of the people that are impacted and elevating them so that they can lead us to new places and a new dominion. We all know, and it's increasingly the case that every Virginian understands, that Black people are disproportionately arrested and subjected to our criminal legal system in Virginia because we have a racist system that overcriminalizes whole communities. That racist system is structured to put more Black people in jail and prison, and it's structured to make sure that when that happens, those individuals can't vote and don't have any civic power. We have to rethink what we call a crime and reimagine how we respond to community and public health issues. We shouldn't be sending the police when somebody has a mental health crisis. We shouldn't be asking the police to address homelessness by arresting people for vagrancy or trespass. We shouldn't be addressing substance abuse disorder by trying to criminalize our way out of it. We should be taking money from police used to fuel this punitive approach and reinvested in public health, social services, housing, mental health, and education programs. That is, the programs that address the underlying problems and provide reparations to the Black and brown communities that have been harmed by our punitive law enforcement approach. We must assure that the civic rights of all Virginians are guaranteed by amending our Constitution to ensure that everybody has a right to vote that can't be taken away by the legislature. And as we work to implement these big changes, we have to act now to hold police accountable, replace the culture of secrecy that permeates law enforcement, and stop the use of force against people who are seeking to make their views known through protests and demonstrations. No one should be gassed or shot with rubber bullets simply for standing up and speaking out about the anti-Black racism in law enforcement that too often drives the use of excessive force. Our police act with impunity in part because there are no consequences that they face for violating people's rights. They can't lose their state certificate that allows them to be police unless they're convicted of a crime, and neither they nor their departments can be held responsible in damages if they kill or injure someone while acting in violation of that person's constitutional rights. This has to change when the legislature meets this summer. In addition, we ask the legislature to create and fund an independent statewide unit that investigates and prosecutes officer-involved deaths and injuries. To engender public confidence, this unit has to be outside the current structures, including, my friend Mark Herring, your office, which is counsel to the state police, perhaps housed in the Inspector General's office. Only by taking swift action now to be sure that we can hold police accountable can we stop the war in our streets that's currently going on in the city of Richmond and other places across Virginia. And only by rethinking and reimagining policing for the future can we really make the long-term substantive changes my colleagues have already highlighted are so essential to having Virginia be the Commonwealth we deserve and everyone deserves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. We've heard from all of our community organizers and leaders who have been identified to share with us at this time, but I do want to take a moment. There were a couple who were scheduled to speak, so I just want to make sure, has Felicia Sharp or Brandon Hutchins joined us? I just want to give them a moment if they've been able to join us. I have multiple screens, so I just want to make sure I check at this time. Okay. So it seems that we've had all of our community leaders share at this time. We will now transition our conversation to inviting our elected officials and public servants to share with us and kind of continue to guide this conversation forward through a Q&A period. It is important to note that some of our elected officials are here to listen and to hear the heart of the community. And so it has not been the thought that each of them will share, but they are here to hear from their communities that they represent. But I do want to let all of our elected officials know at this time you are able to share. We're asking that you keep your sharing down if you would like to respond to or speak into the climate, but with a time limit of 2 minutes as well. And feel free to ask a question of any of our community leaders, whether that is to the panel at large or to a specific individual. You can direct that question at this time, and we will ask that our community leaders take no more than 60 seconds to respond to those questions that have been raised. So at this time, we invite our elected officials to begin sharing or contributing to the conversation. Again, we will not walk down that list of representatives, but they all can choose to join us now by unmuting yourself, or if you would like to use the hand raising feature that is at the bottom of your screen. If I see the hand raise, which will pop up on my screen, I will then make sure that I can identify you if you would like to kind of continue to identify yourself through that fashion as well. That would be super helpful. So we now move forward in the conversation for those elected officials who would like to contribute and or ask a question of our community leaders panelists.
Reverend Gordon?
Yes.
I don't have the hand raise function, or but I have a thumbs up.
Okay.
May I speak, Reverend?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will be brief. I just want to thank you for being here. Thank Delegate Halayala from our House Caucus for arranging this. And I just want to be brief. And Jay Sean spoke earlier, and I want him to know that I hear him, and I think the legislators hear him. And I want to also just mention that for several years, I have been introducing, as well as other legislators, bills on police training. and dealing with communities and communities of color and de-escalation. And time again, they have been defeated. So I will say that we are dusting those off and reintroducing them, as well as I need to also tell you all a little plug about the House Caucus that we will have public hearings of the Public Safety Committee, along with the Courts of Justice Committee, which I chair. We're combining ourselves, and we want to first hear from the community about what they need, their wants, their desires, what type of reforms they think are important for their community. And on a personal note, I will say that this hits close to home in what we saw with Mr. Floyd. I feel that our police should be protectors of the Constitution and not offenders. And we are at a crossroads. We have a choice whether to move forward in a positive direction or we're going to sit back. And I think this is a time, I think there's energy there. And I think there is a public outcry for, no matter the race, that something happened. And I think it is because the promise of our nation is at stake and no one wants to see it go away. So I'm looking forward to the work ahead. And we in the House Democratic Caucus certainly hear everybody, and we want to hear more and fashion solutions that are long-standing, that are inclusive and not just one segment of the community. We want to talk about reform in the most inclusive possible way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And just for further clarity, thank you so much, Claire, for putting in the chat that if you desire to use the hand raise feature, you can click on the participants button at the bottom and you will see that there. So again, that'll be helpful, and I'll make sure I try to swiftly circle through all those who desire to contribute. I also know that the former governor, Terry McCullough, has joined us now. So thank you so much. I know he'll be with us briefly, so feel free at any point to share as well, sir.
Well, Reverend, it's great to be with you. It's great to see you again, and to Hala, Charnel, and everybody else, and to all the community organizers who are on this call today. I want to say thank you for leading the effort that we have going today. We're in a very tough time in our country, but I'm optimistic that we're going to use this time to better ourselves, to make Virginia better, to make the country better. You know, last year, just about a year ago, I wrote a book, and it's called Fighting White Nationalism in America. And I won't go through all the points today, but I talked about inherent racism that we have in our country, and we have it, of course, in Virginia, having been capital of the Confederacy. We have racism in housing and job creation and healthcare delivery. Our criminal justice system in Virginia needs to be totally overhauled. I mean, I leaned in on pardons. I pardoned a young man, Lenny Singleton, young African-American man who, you know, he was a crack addict, and he committed 8 robberies in 7 days. His total theft, folks, was $550. His sentence in Virginia was 2 life sentences plus 100 years. Poor Lenny served over 23 years before I took office, and I was able to pardon him. I could give you chapter and verse of people who, if you're young, from the community of color, you are going to get a disproportionately long sentence. This is an opportunity for all of us to come together to change the system. In the end of my book, I say, I'm tired of politicians talking. I'm tired of reconciliation commissions. It's a bunch of white people sitting around trying to make themselves feel good. I end my book by saying it's time to take action, and it's time to take action now. So I hope everybody is going to use this energy in a positive way to reform what we need to do. We've got a tough economy now in the post-COVID world. How do we build that new economy that everybody benefits? And that's what the real opportunity we have. And to all of the community organizers, thank you. Let's stay on the streets. Let's continue to peacefully protest. But let's not let this opportunity that we have to change our system. People are paying attention. And I get asked, I just did a call for Vice President Biden with a whole bunch of people, and they asked me, why is this different? I said it's different because for many white people, it's the first time they actually saw a lynching. And they saw George Floyd on the ground with a knee on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, screaming out for his dead mother. And I think finally people woke up, and what many of us have been saying for a long time. This goes on every day. It's time to do something about it. It's time to take action, shake up the system. No more talking. Let's get in the game. And I just wanted to thank you, and I thank you, Reverend, for your great leadership on this issue and everything that you have done, and everybody on this call. But, you know, let's go. Game on.
Thank you so much, Governor McCullough. We greatly appreciate it.
Reverend Vernon, this is Shannon, Delegate Ayala's aide. I just wanted to make sure that Representative Conley could speak because I know that he has a heart out right now.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And thank you, Reverend Gordon, for wonderful job hosting, and thanks so much for the presentations. And thank you, former Governor Terry McAuliffe, for joining us today. Hala, thank you for organizing. You know, this past week we passed two important bills in the House, neither of which, of course, are going to become law because the Republican Senate will block them. The Justice and Policing Act finally addressed some very fundamental changes in how we police in America. And the other was to vote for statehood for the District of Columbia. And if anyone wants to pretend that there are constitutional arguments against statehood, you know, I'll be honest with you, when they say it's not about race and partisanship, I guarantee you it's about race and partisanship. And that has to be called out. So let me just make 2 points. And I'm kind of picking up a little bit on Dora Muhammad, as well as Claire's, Gustava's comments. One is, there is a burden to call racism what it is, and frankly, especially by people in the white community. The burden of calling out racism cannot only be on people of color. It's one of the reasons why so many people in the white community didn't focus on institutional racism in law enforcement, because they didn't experience it, they didn't see it. That was apparently someone else's problem. No longer, but where was the media, where were white politicians calling out, for example, the birth certificate challenge of the only black president? And by the way, the only president whose legitimate birth as an American was ever questioned. Where were the media and politicians with the courage to call out the Tea Party for its racist roots? You know, the Tea Party emerged all across America. They were explicit in their racist language. Not everybody, but as an organization, absolutely. And the fact that the media was afraid to call it was just a legitimate reaction to liberal policies of Obama, actually empowered and made legitimate the racist attitudes behind so much of that movement. And that is a huge failure by the white community and by the media. The second thing, and then I'll end, let's start somewhere. And let's start with law enforcement. We have allowed law enforcement in America to develop a very resilient, stubborn culture of impunity. I live in a county where in a 40-year period, with the longest Commonwealth attorney in Virginia, not once was a police officer legally held to account. Not once was a police officer, even if they killed somebody, even if they blew through a red light and killed somebody, ever indicted. Not once. And that lack of accountability permeates police today. You have lots of good men and women in the police, but the unions, the local DAs, even juries and judges protect them. When a cop does something wrong, we've given him or her awesome power, and they must be held accountable. The racism that's been allowed in our law enforcement has to be rooted out, and it's structural. It's not a few bad apples. It's not a few nice reforms that will make it all better. It has to be structurally redone so that the police have a very different view about who they serve and what their roles are. They're not warriors going into battle. They're public servants going in to serve the communities they're assigned to, and they're part of those communities. And until we can reach that goal, the problem we have with institutional racism in America will be enforced with violence and under the rubric of law, and that has to change. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much for your sharing, Congressman. We greatly appreciate it. And then I want to move to Ms. Delegate Elizabeth Guzman had her hand. She used the thumbs up feature to identify herself. So I will now transition the floor to you, Delegate Guzman.
Thank you, Reverend, and thank you, Delegate Ayala, for organizing this event. To all of my colleagues that are joining us today. It's really nice to see you virtually. Attorney General Mark Perry, my very own Congressman Jerry Connolly, former Governor McAuliffe, all of the community leaders. It's a pleasure to be here. After hearing each one of you, number one, thank you for sharing. And I think that we could agree that we need to root out institutional racism, wherever it exists. We need to acknowledge at the same time that this has affected many aspects in our society. And I will start, when we are addressing physical brutality. Yes, it has been around for a while. We also need to recognize that also exists in our public schools with our school resource officers. And is it a position that we actually need? We know that it exists also politically when we see someone in the White House that continue to demonize people who look like me. And as it was mentioned by Beatrice and Monica, putting children in cages. So we need to recognize that also in the legal system, how our Black and Brown communities lead the numbers, for people incarcerated and how it's necessary to have criminal justice reform. Economic disparities. We know that the Black and Brown community are leading the numbers for low-income families here in the Commonwealth. Even environmentally, when we're talking and addressing climate change, we have seen how our brothers and sisters on Union Hill have been affected as well when we're talking about pipelines. And even educationally, when we're talking, and thank you, Monica, for sharing your story about your child on the spectrum. I think that's empower us even more, myself as well. And that's why we need to recognize that there are racial disparities as well in our special education system. How our Black and Brown children are leading those numbers as well. So it's everywhere and at every level, but where do we start? And my question will be to Claire. Claire, I love your idea about the Inspector General. It's something I've been talking about, accountability and transparency, and that's something that we need to promote. And we should put that being accountable ourselves. So Claire, could you tell us more about your proposed idea of the Inspector General Office, please? Thank you.
Sure. The idea that we proposed and we've been trying to work toward for 3 years now, is that both the public and police would be best served if there were a single statewide agency that both investigated and prosecuted any instances of police violence on the job. Certainly officer-involved death or serious bodily injury. And the reason for saying an independent statewide agency is because we all know that people who are prosecutors are very close to their local police people. The Attorney General represents the state police as their counsel. And so looking for a place where we can house a group of experts, because the good news is we don't have enough of these in any one jurisdiction, that there are experts in any locality, but we could have people who both the public and the police could trust, who are experts in both investigating and prosecuting police misconduct that leads to death or serious bodily injury. Obviously, it would take a budget amendment to put that entity in place and fund it so that it could do the work. But we think that that would be something that would bring confidence to the public that people who did engage in misconduct that resulted in death and serious bodily injury would be brought to account. There's been one police person that I'm aware of in Virginia who's ever been prosecuted successfully. Stephanie Morales did that, but plenty of other people have died at the hands of police and not faced any consequences at all. And many others have been seriously injured and faced no consequences.
Thank you all so much. Again, we give space now to any of our other delegates or elected officials to share in questions towards our panelists and community leaders, or to give contribution to the conversation. Yes, I saw somebody, Delegate Ayala, were you about to?
Yeah, we have, Attorney General Mark Herring. There's been some interesting developments, of arrests in Virginia. And I know that, our communities are asking for action. They're asking not only for us to listen, but to take steps forward. So I just love to hear, from his perspective, some of his insights.
Well, thank you, Delegate Ayala, first of all, for organizing this and letting me be a part of it. Reverend Gordon, thank you for your leadership. And we are having a national reckoning right now with police brutality against Black people in this country and the systemic failures that cause and allow this misconduct to continue and be perpetuated. This is not just one of the systems that have been put in place with the thread of white supremacy that has existed in this country for 400 years. But it is even more so because law enforcement and policing, which people of color and communities of color, we know are policed differently. It is documented, it is clear. But part of that is that law enforcement itself has been used to enforce racist and segregationist laws, Jim Crow laws, segregation, been used to break up civil rights demonstrations, been used to bring all of this mass incarceration that we have. So this is a deep-rooted problem, and we are having a national reckoning with it right now. Making a more fair and a more just Commonwealth has been one of my priorities as Attorney General for years, which is why, and Delegate Herring mentioned the difficulty in getting legislation passed for a lot of police training. So we went out and just did it. And we couldn't require it, but we were able to train 125 officers to go into different departments around the state and train their officers and others in the communities around them. And we've done other things as well with youth programs, trying to promote a public health approach to violence reduction. But there is so much more that needs to be done, and I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing in the legislature to take these up probably in August. Things like limiting types of force like chokeholds and no-knock warrants, decertifying officers who have a history of misusing force, civilian review boards for more oversight and accountability, making sure that officers can't just move from one department to another when they've got a history of misuse of force. But all of those police reforms, as important as they are, must be accompanied by a whole nother approach in parallel at the same time, which is rethinking how we achieve our public safety goals and making sure that we realign our funding to reflect that. If you think about all of the instances that police are called upon, they have to be, they're called to deal with someone who's having a mental health crisis. There are others in the community who are probably better suited for that. They're in our schools, and sometimes the discipline issues should be handled as school discipline, but too many times they're turned over to law enforcement, and it's an entryway into the criminal justice system. There are so many ways that we need to rethink our public safety goals, realign our funding to be a priority with that, and I want to be a partner with the community leaders that we've heard from, as well as the legislature and others. And I don't know if Congressman Connolly, if you've already left, but I'll put first of all, thank you for the legislation that the House passed. Again, I don't have a lot. No, I'm still here. Okay, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Mitch McConnell's Senate to approve those. But one thing that you were specifically responsive to was a request from me and some of my Democratic Attorney General colleagues to authorize state attorneys general to do pattern or practice investigations of local police departments, because our own Attorney General and Department of Justice has completely abdicated that responsibility, not just abdicated it, but withdrawn important consent orders like what they did in Baltimore. And on that topic, I hope that is also one that the General Assembly will include, because the General Assembly can authorize my team and I to do it. And it is really important to have somebody from outside the local departments to come in and take a look when there are instances of misuse of force that break down the systems that allow that to be perpetuated. So thank you, Congressman Connolly. Since there are so many delegates and senators on the line, for the General Assembly. I'll put that little bug in your ear for August, and I look forward to continuing our work together.
If I could just respond real quickly, Mark, thank you for that. Every single structural, the beginning of structural change you listed, body cameras, civilian review boards, databases so we can follow the careers of bad police and make sure they're not retired, keeping a database, a national database on the use of force with civilians by police departments, banning chokeholds, and the no-knock warrants. All of that is in the Justice and Policing Bill we passed on Thursday. And we've got to put pressure on the Republican Senate to act. And that's a down payment on some of the structural reforms we're talking about for law enforcement. So, and if Mr. McConnell doesn't relent, then it's up to Virginia to do it here. Thank you.
Thank you both. I just want to articulate, so many are coming through, so I'm going to make sure that I just articulate kind of who's in the pipeline or in queue. We have a question in our chat for former Governor McCullough, so I will share that question at this time. And then following that, Senator McClellan will then share as well. So former Governor McCullough, the question that was raised in the chat was, would you recommend that Governor Northam suspend enforcement of the Lee Monument rules that are being used by the state police and Richmond Police Department to justify the use of tear gas and other excessive force to remove people from the property who don't have a permit or are otherwise in violation of the regulations that your administration put in place? I want to see if you have a response to that. And again, following his commentary, we will turn it over to Senator McClellan.
Yeah, so after Charlottesville, we obviously put some new guidelines in place because the permitting process for that Lee Monument allowed up to 5,000 people to come out in that little small circle. I mean, that is a tremendous hazard. The goal of the governor and everybody else is to keep your citizens safe, and we need to do that. Peaceful protesters, that's something we should be proud of in this country and our Commonwealth. And as long as people are out there all day peacefully protesting, we should be in support of that. The statues, I talk a lot about that in my book. We just need to take these statues down. But let's get rid of these horrible symbols and just take executive authority and do it. I mean, I took the Confederate flag off the Virginia license plates. I banned them. I banned the box. And there are things the executive branch can do. I think the quicker we can get the symbols of hatred and divisiveness done with. But my big point is, once we deal with the symbols, what I am most concerned about are the issues of racism that exist, as I say, in housing and job creation. I'm very concerned about a racist education policy. If every child in Virginia is not getting a quality education, and that's why we work so hard in Petersburg and Richmond and Norfolk schools. But if a young child's going to school and it's not the same quality of education, then that child will be affected for the rest of their lives. To me, that's a form of racism. We need to lean in on the systematic racism we have, education, fully funding to make sure our teachers are paid and to make sure all of our children are getting quality education. Every child in Virginia, something that my wife Dorothy, when she was First Lady, led the effort on. Millions of more breakfasts served to needy children. We had 65,000 children in Virginia, children in need who were not getting access to a healthy breakfast. Well, children are hungry to learn. They can't learn if they're just plain hungry. So let's get these statues down as soon as possible. But most importantly, let's use this to lean in on those issues of why we still have racism after so many hundreds of years in this country. Let's do something about it. End it. Deal on education, housing, healthcare, criminal justice reform. Those are the big challenges. I'm so excited now with Democrats who have the governor in both chambers. Now we can get a lot done. Now is the time to act.
Thank you. Thank you so much, former Governor McCullough. Now asking Senator McClellan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody for participating in this very important conversation. And I want to reiterate that we've had inequity baked into the system from the very beginning. As we commemorated the anniversary of the first General Assembly, the arrival of the first Africans, and the arrival of the first women, what got lost in that conversation was the fact that our country was built on a hierarchy with white men on a business venture at the top, and the first Africans and the first women who came to serve them. And our entire system was built on that hierarchy.
our 400-year struggle has been, how do we make true the values upon which this country professed to be built upon, of life, liberty, and equality, and justice for all. And we began that progress about 150 years ago out of the ashes of the Civil War, through the Reconstruction, when African Americans, newly freed slaves, began to build economic, social, and political power, including the first African Americans who served in this General Assembly, who helped create a system of public education and opportunity for all. And then there was a very swift backlash that led to a constitution that disenfranchised Black people, that led to systematic inequity to put Black people back in their place, that built monuments and a lost cause narrative and used racial terror to put African Americans back in their place. But we persisted, and we made progress in the civil rights movement. And there was a backlash with the election of Richard Nixon on the Southern strategy, but we kept pushing. We elected the first African American president, and there was a backlash in the election of 2016. We've known what we need to do to address these inequities. 50 years ago, the Kerner Commission told us what we needed to do. We didn't do it. But here in Virginia, the Legislative Black Caucus, from the beginning, was fighting for this inequity. And last week, we rolled out our agenda for the special session, just as the House Democratic Caucus and the Senate Democratic Caucus rolled out their agenda. It's bigger than criminal justice reform. We cannot look at these issues in a silo. We have to rebuild our economy. We have to rebuild our education system, our healthcare system, our transportation system, housing policy, all in a way that addresses these inequities holistically, not in silos. We are committed to doing that, but we need your help. We need this to be done at the local, state, and federal level. We need you to hold your elected officials accountable, to tell them these are our priorities, not just when we're in session, but every single day, like many people are already.
Thank you.
Make sure you are telling us your priorities, not just the ones of us who are here,
On top of the
but
crate.
the ones who are not. Every single delegate, senator, member of Congress, and local elected official need to hear from our advocates every single day until this work is finally done. And so I want to thank you, because I know we've been at it a long time, you've been at it a long time, but we're going to make progress. We just have to keep pushing.
Thank you so much, Senator McClellan. We'll be transitioning in a few moments to Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, but I just want to make sure I remind all of our elected officials that if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to direct those to them either at a general landscape, or if you desire to direct a question to someone specifically, you can feel free to do so as well. They are prepared to also share the perspective and insights of those who are representative of their specific communities and organizations. Delegate Guzman, the floor is yours.
On there.
Thank you, Reverend. It's just a question to our panelists. And I want to, take this opportunity to comment that it was mentioned with the Black Caucus for the list of priorities. We look forward to working together and to make sure that we deliver on those in this special session. So my question will be for the organizations. I think this is an opportunity for us, for legislators, to listen. And if they want it's like Monica, Dora, what are you guys looking forward to see in the upcoming special session? This is an opportunity for us to listen. So the floor is yours. Let us know.
So, thank you for asking that, because for the session coming up, to even prepare for the session coming up, what I hope I would even see before that happens is our elected officials going out into the community and asking the community that very question, right? Not just one or two of us, but truly having meaningful conversations in the community and not guessing what you think we want. Because a lot of times people guess, and that guess is wrong. Right? And it's one of those things where don't come back to the community after you've already created the bill, or there's discussion going on, and now the community has to essentially take what they need and try to force it to fit this bill, right? Like, we should be there from the very beginning. From the beginning, while it's happening, afterwards. Like, we should be at that table with you guys at all times, because at the end of the day, you don't know what we need unless we tell you. So yeah, like, I've heard some things in my community, but honestly, I don't want to sit here and just like say, yeah, like, this is what the community wants you to do, because I'm telling you, the community wants to see and they want to hear from you guys and they want to have these conversations. It doesn't have to be 100 people at one time, you know, but it definitely needs to be happening in the community that you guys represent, because, you know, we will have your back, right? You show you have ours, we got your back. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure that our true champions are being elected. But while you guys are, you know, governing, one thing I will say is, please don't cause any more harm by ignoring the voices of those who are most impacted by this. So when you go into the communities, please don't sit down at a table full of white people. Don't sit at a table full of white women, right? If we're gonna have a conversation about the disparities in our school, then we need to be at the table with Black moms, with Black dads, with Black parents, with Black children. Because I will tell you, here in Henrico County, that is something that I'm fighting every day, is the fact that the voices that are being heard are not those that are directly impacted. It is the voices of the white and the affluent parents who have the time to sit at home all day and, you know, and reach out to reporters or do it, you know, sit here and put these groups together. But the parents who are working 2 jobs, they don't have that extra time. So therefore, we have to meet the community where they are. You have to go to them, right? And a lot of times we put so much of that responsibility on the community, but at the end of the day, if you were in the community, you would truly understand the barriers that were placed in front of them. So that is what I would say.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ms. Hutchins, and any others. Oh, I see him. Monica? Yes.
Yes. So as you know, we are currently in the middle of a pandemic. And right now, what we're seeing disproportionately happen in our communities of color is that the financial resources are just not there. We have a crisis on our hands. And right now, we have so many families who desperately need assistance, particularly when it comes to basic things such as paying your rent. And there seems to be an overwhelming disconnection with so many legislators and so many people in, you know, particular positions of power to really understand what is happening in these communities of color, what is happening in mixed status families. You know, about a month ago, I had a very long conversation with an organizer at Dreamers Moms in Action, and they were talking about the very high disproportionate numbers of COVID-19 cases in Prince William County. And so you have here a jurisdiction that it is unlawful to spend any county funds helping undocumented Virginians. And of course, we have mixed status families. A lot of those undocumented immigrants have US citizen children. So these are really big impacts. She was talking about how some people are living in such impoverished situations that they rent a closet because they cannot rent a room. So these people are living in closets. Stories where individuals are talking about how they can't afford soap to wash their hands in order to stay safe from coronavirus. The disparities that have happened for such a long time in these communities are so ingrained. And, you know, to really reflect on this, you know, we had a very large board discussion at this year. And the first thing is we need to really define inequity for us. What does that mean? And how does that really impact Virginians? And how do we go ahead and go from that definition to really solid solutions? But right now, the most urgent thing on the table is getting financial assistance to those in need. And as we know, there is a large discrimination factor from the federal side right now, and also some discriminations on the local side, like we see in Prince William County. Obviously, they're not alone. But right now, you can absolutely do that to provide some relief with so many families that are consistently living in terror. And I know you've seen the numbers, and particularly in Northern Virginia, they're devastating. We have counties that have 77% are Latinos infected with COVID, others with 59%. It's overwhelmingly disproportionate, especially when you look at, you know, our white counterparts. And being able to go ahead and bridge the divide and understanding that this is a time of urgency and the time to act is now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, and we're already incredibly late, because I have another member organization who took a poll in April and let us know that we had people who could not pay their rent in March or April. The eviction rate is going to go ahead and explode now that that memorandum is up. We have our crisis on our hands. and people's lives on the line. And so, that urgency, that immediate action on acting on that financial assistance for those in need is the biggest thing right now. We work with New Virginia Majority, and they come out with a number that when it comes to just for rental assistance, we need $2.1 billion. And although the governor announced earlier this week $50 million, and that's a great start, and we put out a statement saying that's a great start, but look at the overwhelming need and look how that disproportionately impacts communities of color, and how if you don't do something now, we're going to end up with a much larger homeless population. We already have individuals suffering at the fact that they can't afford healthcare. They can't afford soap. So how are they going to afford the needs that they have if they come down with COVID-19, and many already have? And so we have to recognize those disparities. We have to recognize what is actually happening in these communities. Because, how many of you here have met someone who's living in a closet or who's homeless or who's struggling to buy basic things like soap? And so that disconnection has been happening for a long, long time. But at the same time, to say that these individuals aren't here working hard, we know that a minimum wage job does not pay the bills, but it is also anticipated that so many immigrants, work these jobs for not a living wage. So it's a very complex system. But, with this special session coming up, the biggest thing that you can do is provide economic relief for these families in need.
Thank you so much for sharing, Monica. Any other of our community leaders or panelists?
Yes.
Respond to
Yes,
that?
this is Galen speaking, and I totally agree with what Monica just said. The post-COVID is going to be the major issue for us, because especially in education, we have children that have been out of school trying to learn online, or parents who trying to be teachers and maybe not finish their education themselves. They were already behind, and they're going to even be more behind, going into the fall. And so that's going to be a disparity, especially for Black and brown children. The other issue is going to be workforce development and workforce period. We get calls all the time about discrimination in the workplace. Here lately, and in the past year, and I did a forum last year with Claire was on the panel, is hair follicle testing with African Americans. The hair follicle testing is a problem because we have people that are getting tested to get a job. They pass everything else, but when they get to the hair follicle testing, they fail because Black hair attracts drugs. So if you pass somebody that's smoking a joint, then it'll get in your hair and stay in your hair. If you touch money that might have some drugs on it and touch your hair, it stays in your hair. And we have people that have not gotten jobs. I have a list of names of people who don't do drugs who were tested positive. And this has been going on for years. So that's an issue. That's a disparity. We have many disparities that's in the workplace, in education, that we need to address. And lastly, I just want to say this: the post-COVID and the economics, and we'll need to have all the funding. But we need to hold the International Union Police Association accountable. Yeah, I support the unions, but I went on their webpage. They have not said one thing about any of these murders whatsoever. Not one thing, not one apology. Now we're going to try and make this work. Not anything. They are not on our side, but they protect all of these police officers who are doing these murders and who are doing these acts of violence, on Black and brown people and getting away with it. And then that's the reason why you had Mr. Floyd's, the police officer, had 18 counts against him in the past. 18 things that happened to him. The police union came in every single time. And we need to start talking about the association and start holding them accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Again, the question on the floor that was raised by Delegate Guzman was, are there any other things that we would like to see as community leaders, particularly in light of the special session that is about to arise? Thank you so much for those who've already shared, but I want to make sure I give the floor to anybody else who would like to make any specific, raise any awareness. I think Muhammad, are you?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And Monica, thank you for everything that you shared. I actually live in Prince William County. And so at Virginia Interfaith, I oversee our health equity program as well as being involved in our racial equity work. And literally for the past 2 years, there actually has been mixed status families disenrolling from their private health insurance plans because of federal, national kind of public charge, all the fears around immigration and fears of being deported. So the impact on the immigrant population in Northern Virginia really needs to be a focus. I think sometimes in legislation, we can, of course, try to do things like statewide. What needs to happen is some real target focus on these areas that are truly, truly deeply impacted more so than the other regions. So 2 years ago, we saw in our health equity work that Prince William County and Chesterfield were the two counties that saw massive disenrollment from marketplace health insurance plans because of public charge. So when COVID came around, you already had such an immense need for public benefits and public assistance. You already had so many families already disengaged from the system because of that. And so it's been further compounded. One of the things at Virginia Interfaith that we are looking and exploring and defining is really prioritizing social determinants of health, which have pretty much been flattened by COVID. So when we're talking about, so a couple of people already brought it up, so I won't reiterate, but the digital divide, food insecurity, affordable housing, mental health resources, all of these things we're beginning to prioritize now as part of our health equity work coming out of COVID that we have to address. Mental health and actual like ACEs and actually having some of that included in and reimbursed through Medicaid. There's so many different things that's happening on the traumatic side for people of color in our communities. They have to have resources to cope outside of the policy changes to make sure that there's holistic family and community development. So I just wanted to add that to the mix.
Yes, and this is Beatrice Amberman. This is Beatrice Amberman, and I just wanted to share with you that COVID-19 actually has brought to the surface the disparities and racism that exists regarding the healthcare system. As Monica stated, the Black and Latino communities have suffered the infections and the death rates higher than anybody could expect it. And yet, it seems that we are afraid to also recognize that undocumented immigrant community, it is an important labor force for the Commonwealth and the nation. And yet, we refuse to acknowledge that we must offer some services, health services to this population. Another thing that I would like to see in the upcoming session is some type of policy that brings the protection to these workers, to their, to their lives. Because frankly, I don't know, and we don't have data to see what inspections have taken place in areas where the immigrant community is working, or even those places in which those workers have been infected. The numbers are not readily available, and I would like to make sure that that takes place. And going back to what Attorney General Mark Herring mentioned, I feel that this is a time where we are beyond just having conversations. Our community is looking for action and for laws to be changed. Frankly, it is not an impossibility. We have lived in a system that has put laws in place that affected many communities. So the fact that the governor is reviewing many of those laws is commendable, but I think it is time for us to be proactive and really make sure that the laws that we put next year at the General Assembly really alleviate some of these issues: healthcare, workforce, labor protections, and the like. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know Tanya James is in the queue. Tanya, please speak now.
Thank you. I don't know if this is something that we can talk about for the special session, but definitely in the 2021 session, we really need to take a hard look at how our state police is policing. I know there's a lot of confusion about local police and our state police that are both showing up to these demonstrations and protests. I was a Marine for 20 years, and in no way, shape, or form should we be using tear gas, rubber bullets. Those are all very, very much what we use, in against enemy combatants. And residents of Virginia are not enemy combatants. So I would encourage each one of our members of the General Assembly to take a hard look at that, as well as our Attorney General, to see why we're doing that. And there are better ways to approach maintaining a peaceful protest and demonstration by attacking our residents and at these events. So please definitely take a hard look at how our Virginia State Police is policing and what we can do to make it better. Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying.
If I could just respond and say thank you, Tanya, for that. And I was very clear that the use of force and tear gas against peaceful demonstrators who were demonstrating lawfully was wrong, and I made it clear whether it happens in Washington, D.C. or Richmond, Virginia, that's wrong, and we should really encourage the continued energy and expressions, true expressions, for not tolerating the status quo any longer.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Herring. And now I know Delegate Scott has had his hand raised. Delegate Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone putting this together. Delegate Ayala, thank you. I just wanted to say, as I was kind of listening, number one, I understand when I first ran, I'm a freshman, so I've only been in the game for 6-7 months now. But when I ran, I was talking to some constituents and asking them to vote for me. And I said, hey, when I get there, please come up and come and testify and come and speak and be vocal. And they looked at me and they said, that's why we're sending you up there. We don't have the time, we don't have the resources, we don't have the disposable income to come up there. So the folks who are on this call are the voices. And as much as we would love to have 20,000 people coming on MLK Day like the gun lobbyists do and scare the hell out of everybody, we don't have that luxury because our communities are so busy just trying to survive. They don't have the luxury to come up there. So it's up to all of us to be courageous. And so one of the things that I wanted to, challenge all of the folks on this call who are community-minded, activists, and engaged, don't listen to anything that we say, including me. Do not listen to me. Watch how I vote. That is how I tell you what I believe. I don't care what we say on this call. I don't care how many sentiments that we express. I don't care how many platitudes that we award. I don't care how many things that we say. Watch how we all vote. I will be watching. I will be pushing that. If you look at how this system is designed, and I heard Senator McClellan say about a holistic approach, and it's not just about criminal justice, and it's not just, I think it is, all of it is intertied, all of it is tied together and interwoven. But at the end of the day, the people who are suffering the most, those who are in cages for unlawful sentences and long sentences, those who don't have the money to wash their hands, don't tell them it's not about justice. Don't tell them it's about getting out, because that is all they're thinking about every day. I got stacks of letters here to show you. We have to be responsive to what we can fix right now. We don't need to wait 6 months and 3 months or anything else. We got things that we can do right now. We're not going to be able to wave a wand and fix everything. There are some things that we have movement behind right now that we need to be getting done. And the last thing I want to say in closing is, we're talking about police reform. That's important. But they have a cause and effect. When they do wrong, there are people who go to jail when they do wrong. They cover stuff up. There's another element in this whole package that we're patting each other on the back about. Commonwealth Attorney General. I've had cases where I've defended cases that I know the police are wrong. In the Attorney General's office, all due respect to Attorney General Herring, they have defended officers who have set up black leaders who speak out against injustice, and the police have prosecuted them wrongfully, and the AG's office have defended those folks and backed those convictions. They hadn't reviewed it and say, this is wrong, this is unjust, I'm not going to back it. They've defended it. Same thing with police officers. Same thing with most of our Commonwealth attorneys. we give over deference to police officers that do the wrong thing, to law enforcement that do the wrong thing. I'm asking, as we move forward, don't listen to what people say, watch what they do, watch what they vote, how they vote, and hold them accountable.
Thank you so much. And Senator McClellan, I know you just put something in the chat, but I don't know if you want to add to the comments of Delegate Scott just to round out or bring clarity to that as you paste in the chat. Just for the sake of those who will be watching the rebroadcast, I want to make sure I give you space to add to that commentary.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify. I 100% agree that we need to address what happens when people enter the criminal justice system, and that's the urgent need. I was not suggesting we needed to do one over the other, but if we are not addressing all of these systems, then we're never going to solve this problem. So we need to address it all, and we can't address it all.
Thank you so much, Senator McClellan.
May I respond?
Yes, you may.
I wasn't implying that she was saying that, but what I am saying is, you know, right now it's about the art of the doable. And there are certain things that can be done now. That holistic approach, I'm all for. But I think we can't overwhelm the public. There are some specific things that they want done right now that we can do. And I'm with the overall arching view, but I think we have to be honest. Don't get too far out because we end up explaining a whole lot of stuff. I want to make sure that we focus on the things that we can do now, and that's all I'm saying. And I love you, Jim.
Thank you both so much for your sharing. Are there any other questions? I see Monica Hutchinson. Please share.
I was just going to say, just follow up about the criminal justice reform for the police officers. One thing that we definitely need is to get something. We need something passed to where police officers cannot use stun guns or pepper spray on our kids in school, because I'm here to tell you that they do. They pepper spray our kids. They will tase the kids. So this is something that should not happen at all. So, I just want to make sure, don't know if Attorney General Mark Herring even knows about that. But to all the legislators on this call, when you guys are thinking about police reform and criminal justice reform, that has to be something. And it cannot be left up to the police department to make that decision. It needs to that needs to be a state mandate coming down saying, you cannot pepper spray or tase our kids. One of our NAACP teams that we have, when she was in middle school, she was, we've had students in middle school tased. We've had students in middle school pepper sprayed, thrown up against walls, handcuffed, and not for anything serious at all. These are really minor things that they're pepper spraying our kids for. So I just want to make sure that, that is something that needs to be addressed and on the table.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know I'm seeing hand claps, and I just don't want to misinterpret those as requests for hands raised. But I think you're getting some hand clap support, Ms. Hutchinson. I do want to make sure I give a kind of a warning call that we have about 20 minutes remaining on our discussion. So thank you for those who've been able to be a part of this discussion thus far. And once again, I want to create the space for any of our elected officials to ask questions of our community leaders. But I do want to, I believe I saw Delegate Cliff Hayes. If you want to share, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Gordon. Just wanted to follow up to the last presenter with the NAACP of Henrico County. She talked about many of the things that are happening to our young people, including pepper spray. I definitely want to add to that while we have people listening, including the Attorney General, the use of these bean bags for crowd control. In many instances with our young people standing by innocently. And I have a family member in Austin, Texas, who's a victim of this as well, where he was actually shot in the head, fractured his skull with the use of a beanbag. Now, I can tell you, no law enforcement is trained to shoot those beanbags any higher than, say, the stomach area, the legs, if you will, to try to use in the case of crowd control. And here, indiscriminately, they had an officer to shoot and hit a young person. Justin Howard is his name. Shot him in the head, fractured his skull, and who knows what his recovery is going to be like, as he's in the hospital in the ICU for over a month. So I just wanted to add to that conversation when it comes to pepper spray and stun guns, but also in the case of crowd control, that law enforcement is using these bean bags as well.
Thank you for sharing, Delegate Hayes. I'm so grateful for that contribution. I know Ms. Muhammad, I believe you had thoughts to share. The floor is yours.
Real quick, as we begin to look at sort of all of the police reforms that we want to enact, I'm not sure if, Mark, if you all have a relationship or any kind of influence, but here in Prince William County, the National Commission for the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies exists. Their headquarters are right here in Prince William County. So as we try to build in accountability measures for law enforcement within Virginia, that is definitely an avenue that we can apply some pressure to and begin to build in and codify some things that they need to do. Schools lose accreditation when they violate certain things, and I think the law enforcement agencies throughout the Commonwealth need to have the same level of accountability.
Attorney General, would you like to respond to that?
We absolutely need to have greater accountability, and that's one of the reasons why we need to have a process to decertify officers who have history of misuse of force. That's why I would like to have the authority to do pattern or practice investigations of departments that have high numbers of instances of abuse. And to one of the points that has been made earlier, it is really important to have somebody who is outside of a local department conduct investigations so that the public has confidence in the result and that it's not going to be investigations of your own department.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. Others, with about 15 minutes remaining, are there any other thoughts, contributions, and or questions? Yes, sir. Delegate Joseph, the floor is yours.
I'll just tell you, I just think that we're in a space and time where there's a greater awareness of the abuses that are taking place within the police department, those who are designated to protect and serve. I kind of disagree with some who think that it's just something that's going to run its course and then bounce back the other way, only because we're in the age of social media. And I think that what you're going to find is that it's one thing when you tell the story, it's another thing when it's vivid and in technicolor and people are seeing it and you can't excuse it and you can't justify it and you can't get around it. There's no question that we've got prejudices throughout the American culture, the American society. No question that we've got work to do. Many of us who are on this call, many in the community, the change agents, as you will. And I think that I accept the challenge of my colleague Don Scott. I believe that we've got to look at legislation, both from a standpoint of the financial, from a standpoint of the schools, and what we're doing with the prison, the school to prison pipeline. Likewise, from the standpoint of what we're doing with making sure that people who want to have an honest living and want to be safe in the community aren't put upon simply for speaking out for injustices that are being perpetrated by the police. So I'm happy to be a part of this call and this dialogue. And I think that this is a start to something that is going to bring about some incredibly impressive change in terms of legislation coming just not only in the special session, but also in this session from next year.
There, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't remind all of us that we have people in prisons and jails who are very vulnerable to COVID-19 and who we got a very poignant letter from one of the parents of one of the people that we are working to get out of prison, asking us not to forget them in the context of where we are now. In other words, let's not move on to the issue of police in the streets, and we still haven't really addressed what's happening in our prisons and jails. 40% of the people in our jails have never been convicted of anything, and many of them are very much vulnerable to the potential for COVID infection. And some sheriffs and local agencies, like the Commonwealth's attorneys in Charlottesville, Albemarle, and the sheriff in Virginia Beach, have been pretty aggressive in moving people out of local jails, but that isn't the case across the Commonwealth. And with respect to the prison system, I cannot. Yesterday, we've been trying to. We have a settlement agreement, and we've been trying to push for data about the people that are being processed under the budget amendment that the governor recommended and gives the Department of Corrections authority to release people. And this past week, in the past reporting period, there were only 22 people who actually walked out the door, which seemed quite low to us relative to the commitments that have been made. And the response from the Department of Corrections to our request for enforcement of the court order was to essentially say that the ACLU was seeking to become relevant by making statements that were unwarranted and unsubstantiated, and rather than taking seriously the need to make sure that people who are vulnerable to this disease, who are within, according to the budget amendment, they have to be within a year of the end of their sentence, are not being walked out of prison lightly, but with thought and consideration. And we've got no information, and in fact, the governor's office has refused to give us any information about what they've said they're going to do to make conditional pardons available to people who are medically needy of those pardons, whether it's because of COVID or other concerns. And he set up a whole system, and he put it out there that he's going to do it. But when we asked for information about what was happening and who was being processed and whether anybody had gotten one, we were told it was executive privilege and we weren't going to get any information. So, while what's happening in the streets of the city of Richmond and across the Commonwealth needs our attention, we also need, please, not to forget the people who are in our prisons and jails, who are among our most vulnerable populations and obviously disproportionately Black and brown.
Thank you so much, Claire. Yes, I believe Jay Sean Hutchinson has comments to share.
Yes. Excuse me. So I just want to say I haven't been asked a question, so I'm just going to come out, see what I have to say. So to go off what Claire said, so how about we sit down with our students and we have conversations with them about the school to prison pipeline. Also, with that being said, how about we don't shoot me with a beanbag at all? How about we train our cops how to dilute situations, just in general? And with this being said, my question to you is, how can we do this? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, the last thing that we want is to take our SROs out of school. But you wouldn't know that because a lot of the time we don't sit down and have conversations with our kids. So how about we, as a whole, right, we take the time out of our day to sit down and have conversations with not just the community, but I mean the Black kids, not the West End kids, not the white kids, but our Black students. Thank you.
I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that specifically. I think Delegate Ayala took her phone off mute. I can't hear her.
I did. There you go, Reverend. Put me on the spot. But I think, I think he asked a poignant question that requires a bigger conversation. And I will say this, because my follow-up to all of this is that not only do you need to find solutions, but you need to listen. That's what we're here for today. And just as Jay Sean said, you wouldn't know some of these things if you didn't ask us, right? Too many times, we have taken the position either as lawmakers or as, maybe organizers that have gone into communities and says, this is what you need, instead of asking what we need. And I think this is why, as a whole, we've created this platform because, this is not the end of the conversation. We've been doing these conversations, but recent circumstances has heightened our awareness and acknowledgement of these issues and that the need for taking action. So many steps in my life have led me to this point of community or uniting or building bridges so that we can have this authentic conversation. I also have a question, and I want to add that to this conversation along with, Jay-Sean's question, and that is, some of our young folks look up to us as leaders, and I will look at the community leaders and even those who are numerically less than I am. I'm trying to be very cordial and just say, I don't want you to lose faith in us, right? I don't want you to see us not taking action. We want you not only to be engaged when things are occurring across America or in our backyards. We want you to be engaged all the time. So what can we do better as leaders to engage you? What can we do better to reach out? How can we connect the dots and say, hey, you can trust Hala Ayala or anyone on this conference call that we are going to put our best foot forward. And I think you do have leaders on this call that are doing that, right? But we still need that continuous interaction. This is our General Assembly is only available to us so many days out of the year, every year, and we must continue to have these conversations prior to us getting there. And I know that we do that, so don't misunderstand me, but I really want to know how we can do better. If we're already doing these things, great. If not, how can we up our game?
It's a great question. Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can say something really quick about it. Make sure you attend NAACP meetings and make sure that because we always hold platform meetings in our branches. But you're be a life member of the NAACP and be active and know what our platform is. We make sure we let you know, but come and see what it is on a local level. And it's our responsibility too to reach out to you as well, and you respond. I mean, we don't have that problem in Hampton Roads and some other areas, I know that, but there are areas in rural areas and some other areas where they don't have representation. We need to be reaching out to the communities, the Black and brown communities in those areas as well, because we are one Virginia. Everyone has different needs, and NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization, and we speak up, and we carry power with our words and what we do in our deeds. And so make sure you're a life member of that and you be involved.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Gayleen, for that. I was going to say that as well. And NAACP.org is where you can go join. Just letting everybody just throwing that out there real quick. NAACP.org. So, and you'll find your local branch when you join. But I was going to also add that to be connected to, especially to our teens, and also to parents who, our economically disadvantaged families. I am a huge supporter of the Boys and Girls Club. I have kept my kids in the Boys and Girls Clubs ever since I can remember. And the Boys and Girls Club is a phenomenal organization that gets no kind of attention whatsoever. And from tutoring to I am so grateful for them because one, they have been making sure that our teens' mental health has been okay. Not the schools, not the counselors. It was the Boys and Girls Club calling to check in on our teens, having weekly sessions. And so I would definitely say if, you are around, if there's a Boys and Girls Club in your district, I would urge you to truly reach out and get to know them. Volunteer. Just go volunteer there, right? Like, get to know the kids without asking for anything in return. Showing up to show that you truly do care, and not just during an election year either, or GOTV, but just being there to show that you're there for support. And so that is one place that I'm telling you, by getting involved with the Boys and Girls Club, you will be connected with the kids and also the families who definitely need to see and hear from you guys, and would be able to build that relationship with you as well, to where they would feel comfortable sharing. And that's the other problem, is that until there's that trust, it's hard to get somebody to share their personal story and to ask for help. because they don't know. They don't know if you will exploit that. They don't know if you're really going to work for them. Like, they don't know. And to the average person, politicians and our electeds are just, they seem out of reach for them, right? Like, no matter how many times we tell them that they really are accessible, they seem out of reach. And so just showing up would really show, like, hey, I'm here. Like, I'm here. I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to do this. Like, let's work together. And by building that trust, you will start getting more people to come to you with their issues and their problems. But yeah.
Reverend, I have one thing for you. I know we're wrapping up, but I want to hear from you. You have done such a gracious job. Can't even get it out of my mouth today. But you have been so graceful and just doing a wonderful job moderating this event. But, please add to the conversation as we're finishing up and helping us close out, not only a note of how we, digest this spiritually, but how do we get through this and unite us, build bridges so that we are always building not only hope, but taking action.
Well, thank you so much, Delegate Ayala. And again, it's been an honor to serve with all of you all. I guess I'll start a bit anecdotally and share a quick story of why this conversation is so valuable to my wife and I. I recently moved into the Chesterfield community within the last several years, and I have experienced racial profiling personally. I was approached in my vehicle, not moving at all, asked to step out of the vehicle, asked what I was doing in front of that house. And I said, "You mean the one I own?" And so a conversation ensued and did not end or conclude until I had to prove to the officer that I had ownership of the residence by putting my key in the door. With about an 18 to 20 minute interaction, but could have been much worse had I not also, who I know Delegate Cliff knows, a grandfather who was the first African-American colonel in the local police department. So with a storied history in law enforcement, I knew how to interact with officers, but at the same time, that consciousness that this could go another way. I don't know how to interact. And knowing that the officer had no grounds for this 20-minute dialogue, I think part of what we're talking about is training as well, and making sure that we are creating cultural competencies. For me as a faith leader, and particularly one that is pastoring a congregation that is over 1,000 young minority millennials, I will say that to your question, Delegate Ayala, the other thing I would encourage all of our elected officials to understand is that how important media is in creating a new narrative, that we cannot rely on just antiquated systems of communication, that there is polarizing media in the national media, and then social media is not always healthy either. And so if we desire to really communicate to those who are a part of the communities we're leading, I think we need to reimagine and reconstruct the way we communicate, and the way we invite people to the conversation. If you post something on Facebook, it represents a different demographic. If you share something on Instagram, it represents a different demographic. And so I think just all of us should be better thinking about all of those resources. And I'll close with this heart that I think is vitally important for all of us, and that is when I look at the book of Revelations, it says that at the throne of heaven, and I know everybody may be a person of faith, but at the throne of heaven, there'll be every tribe, every nation, every tongue, and every creed. And I believe that if that's the picture of heaven, this should be the picture of earth. And so I think that we have a beautiful picture on this call today of what is possible, but we must all practice proximity and recognize that it's not social change or cultural unity. It's not either or, it's both and. And if we can leverage that passion and power, I think we'll be better because of it. So again, Delegate Ayala, I'm so humbled and grateful to be a part of this call. I can only hope that my contribution in moderating today was valuable to the dialogue. And again, thank you all for being wonderful contributors to what our Commonwealth will become for the benefit of my children and the benefit of all the generations to come. So Delegate Ayala, I do turn it back over to you at this time to close us out.
Hey.
Thank you, Reverend. I think you did just do justice to the closing out of this event. I think this is just a beautiful way to leave a conversation. Let's continue it. Let's move Virginia forward. Let's move our nation forward. Let's heal. Let's start taking action and start making progress. So with that, onward, my good friends. Thank you all for joining. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.